name is Arrey Edwards, and this is Too Scared, a horror anthology podcast featuring terrifying tales from talented authors. To get notified when a new episode of Too Scared is published, please consider subscribing and turning on your notifications. Too Scared is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Just search for Too Scared with Arrey Edwards. So, do you want to hear a story? I will never return to this abandoned elementary school. So before I start my experience, I want to share that I am an urban explorer, not a ghost hunter. I never think abandoned places are haunted, and I just love the beauty of them and love taking pictures inside them. But there is one in particular that changed my mind. Keep in mind, I've explored asylums like the infamous Allentown State Hospital in Pennsylvania. Hospitals, prisons, mortuaries, and all the creepy places. You name it, I've explored it, and I've never experienced anything even close to paranormal. Nor would I go looking for something like that inside these beautiful places. So keeping all that in mind, my paranormal experience starts here. So, as an urban explorer, I'll drive for hours at a time searching for abandoned places. And when I find one, I'll mark it on Google Maps and move on searching for the next. We follow codes, like take nothing but photos, leave nothing but footprints, and never explore alone. And a bunch more. Thus why I didn't explore the location by myself. The location takes place in northern Utah. After driving for hours, I finally stumbled upon an old abandoned location that looked like a small church in the middle of nowhere on the outskirts of a small town. The building still had windows and looked like it had never been vandalized. I decided to head into a small residential area to try to get a backstory of the old building. After knocking on doors and meeting the nicest old people I've ever met, I got a story of the old abandoned building. It was an old elementary school, built in 1941 and used until 1949. Afterwards, it was abandoned until the 1970s when an old biker bought it to make it into a biker clubhouse. Shortly after buying the property, the biker died for unknown reasons. After some time in the 1970s, it went abandoned again after the biker's death and has sat abandoned ever since. So I got the story. But being alone, I didn't want to break the code of exploring alone. And I also wanted to wait so my exploring partner could experience it with me. I thought I would at least jump the fence and figure out if there was a way in, like an unlocked door or a window, since we don't break in. I didn't want to waste my time going back with my partner with it being locked, so I started searching. I stumbled on a door in the back, wide open, and wanted to see if it went into the school, so I walked inside to check it out. As I entered the room, I got a feeling I have never experienced in my whole life of exploring. The room was only a cellar and didn't lead into the school, so I decided to leave and keep looking. As I exited the cellar, I heard a small voice in the window above me, that of a kid, and it froze me in my tracks. I thought, there's no way, and I assumed I was being stupid, but it still creeped me out enough to leave and come back with my friend to look for an entrance. As I started back for the fence, I heard the voice again, and turned around quick to see if someone was in the window, but there was nothing. I got home and told my exploring partner all about it as he laughed at me, like I was dumb, because never in our whole career of exploring have we ever had something happen like that. Fast forward a week later, and it's now time to explore the location. I called my partner, but he had to go to California for a family emergency, so he couldn't go, so I called my friend who had never explored with me before. Keep in mind, this guy going with me, I've never told the story to of the voice I heard, and only told my exploring partner. We end up showing up at the park far away down the street at 4 a.m. We go in the night and get inside places unseen, and sit in the dark and wait for the sun for photos to not get caught. We get out of the car and walk, arriving at the fence, and I instantly jump over the fence and start walking toward the back of the building to find a way inside, leaving my friend trying to climb over to keep up. As I get around the back of the school to the side of the school, I find a window with a little piece missing, so I can reach inside and pull up the window, and it's unlocked. Right when I figured out we could get inside, I heard my friend whisper, "Hey," to me in the back of the little school. I immediately run to the back thinking he spotted someone or a cop, and I ask, "What?" And he said, "I heard a voice in the window, a ball bouncing or something." This window he was talking about was the exact same window I originally heard the voice in earlier in the week. My adrenaline from trying not to get seen kept me quiet, and I didn't say anything about it, and headed back to the unlocked window. We both jumped down into the school basement, and I could tell this room was part of the school, so we posted up and started the wait for the sun, waiting in the dark with no flashlights to not get seen by someone, maybe in the distance. Now is when I brought up to him that I had experienced the same thing when scouting the location. As soon as I told him that, we immediately heard walking upstairs. Not like the building settling, but walking right above our heads. I immediately assume a homeless person and start getting nervous, and I told him not to make a sound. We didn't leave right then, just in case they would hear us. As we were sitting there freaking out, deciding what to do, we started hearing someone sniffing like their nose was runny and clearing their throat. I was now 100% convinced there was a man upstairs right above us. Fearing he would hear us, we sat still, frozen in the dark. In this time, I'm putting together in my head how a homeless man would even be living out here with no car to leave on the property, miles away from anything even close to civilization. The sound of walking and throat sounds went on from 4:30 a.m. to 5:30 a.m. As soon as the sun started rising over the mountains and we could barely see our hands in front of our faces, the sound stopped completely. We continued to stay quiet until the sun was finally up enough to see the whole room, and decided to go out into the basement hallway. You might ask, why didn't you just leave? Being an urban explorer, I need new photos. It's an addiction, and I'm going to get my shots until I get chased out. So we go into the hallway, walking slow, and all of a sudden we hear someone jumping the fence and walking up to the school. These are big, heavy footsteps outside, heading straight for us. We stop against the hall wall in the basement, and the feet walk up to the ground window in the hallway, completely covered in dirt and spiderwebs to the point where we can't see through it all. As we're standing there, I can hear dirt popping under his boots on the cement right outside the window. And I start hearing Velcro, and what sounds like someone loading a magazine and a gun. Cops put gloves on before they arrest you, so my soul went into my stomach. I whispered to my friend, "I think it's a cop," just by the sounds, and assumed he saw our car and knew we were inside. This town is so small they don't even have a police force, because they come from the next town over, so I assumed he was not letting us know that he was there waiting for backup. I decided to make a game plan, and I told my buddy we need to surrender, and maybe they'll be cool, and I didn't want a cop dog to come in. I texted someone in my family and said, "Hey, we're getting arrested. I'll contact you as soon as I can." And the time came. I walked up to the window and yelled, "Hey, we're urban explorers, only taking photos and nothing more. We came in the north window and we will come out of the north window," telling him so we wouldn't get dragged out the window on broken glass. Right as I finished saying that, I heard it run up to the window, getting ready to hear a cop barking orders, but nothing. I looked at my friend and said, "That's not a cop. We need to go now, because now whatever it is knows we're there, and we'll do whatever it takes to get away if it's not a cop." We run to the window, and my friend holds it open, and I jump out and do the same for him, and start creeping around the outside to the front of the school with my hands up around the corner just in case they had a gun. I get around the building, and there's nobody there. My friend looked at me and said, "Let's leave, dude." I said, no, I need these photos, and we went inside and explored and got some amazing pictures with no more problems. I told my main exploring partner all about what happened, as he just laughed and called me dumb for not understanding the severity of what happened. After seeing my photos, he said, I need to get pictures of this location, because it was untouched, packed full of unique, cool, expensive items, and had never been explored before. I agreed, later to come to realize this was a mistake. So here I am again at 4 a.m., dropping into the basement window of the same room. I keep talking about what happened and how crazy it was as he's laughing, thinking we're just hearing things, because why, out of all the places we've explored, like asylums, hospitals, and everything creepy, why a tiny little elementary school in the middle of nowhere? Time passes and we're waiting for the sun. He starts laughing about something we're talking about, and I hear something. I told him to be quiet. I heard something, and he starts laughing again, and I hear it again. This guy is extremely loud, so it's hard to get him to shut up. I tell him again, dude, be quiet and listen. And again, he thinks I'm being dumb. But then all of a sudden, I hear a laugh down the hallway, and this time, he heard it, because he immediately stops talking. He then says, what the fuck was that? And I said, it sounded like a kid laughing. We stared at the door, from what we could see, for about 10 seconds, only barely being able to see the white door frame. And all of a sudden, right in the doorway, a child laughed extremely loud, laughing and giggling about 14 feet away. This sent us flying backwards in fear, falling over boxes and slamming on the ground, and I immediately turned on my flashlight and pointed it at the door, lying on the ground expecting to see a child standing there, and there was nothing. My partner immediately jumped up and started crawling as fast as he could out the window, as I pointed the flashlight at the door, waiting for my turn to climb out of the window. When I started crawling out of the window, imagining the laughing we heard sent me into a panic kicking feeling like it was going to grab my legs as I climbed, and we took off running back to the car in the night. This story is true, and I want you to understand this is the only time something like this has ever happened. I've explored over 400 locations and never anything. Only this little 1940s elementary school in northern Utah in the middle of nowhere I will never forget, and I will never return to this location for as long as I live. The first house I moved into out of high school while I was going to college was a very old, very small house in a town that dated back to the Civil War. I lived there with 3 other guys since rents were high, but we made it work. The house was built on a hill and had a small driveway in front of it with a U-shaped driveway in back. It had a full basement and was owned by someone with multiple rental properties in the area. They told us we had full access to the upstairs, but they used the downstairs for storage, and to never go down there, because it was full of their stuff. We never questioned it, because the rent for this particular location in our area was low. We were still technically on campus, but our house was surrounded by other college students, so we could have parties whenever we wanted. Everything was great, until we started having unwanted visitors. At first, things were pretty easy to ignore or completely write off. A roommate home by themselves would walk into a room and the lights would be on when they were home alone and hadn't flipped any switches. Someone else would hear a faucet turn on and off in a room with no one in it. We tried to do what research we could at the time and found that water pressure can cause faucets to do some crazy things on their own, and that power surges can do similar things with flickering lights. Unfortunately, things kept getting stranger. At one point, a roommate who was home alone got out of the shower, looked into the mirror to start shaving, and noticed that someone else stepped out of the shower behind him and left the room. He searched the house, but couldn't find anyone else home at the time. Later on, a different roommate had several items go missing out of his room, including his keys and a pocket knife. He later found them in our microwave. Again, no one else was home at the time. Me, personally, I got home on a day when nobody else was at the house for the next couple of hours in between classes. There was a folding chair on the front porch next to the door, and I had an armful of books. I set the books down on the chair, unlocked and pushed open the front door, turned and picked up my books, and when I went to walk into the house, the door slammed in my face. I thought the wind had caught the door and went to open it, but discovered that the door had locked itself again, both handle and deadbolt. Last of all, 3 of us were sitting on a couch watching TV when we heard a loud, heavy thud, as though something had been dragged off of a bed in a back bedroom. All 3 of us later confirmed that we could distinctly hear both footsteps walking through the house, as well as the sound of something heavy being dragged behind. Last of all, the back door opened and slammed shut, even though we were all in the living room, and there was supposed to be no one else in the house. A week later, we started to smell gas in the house. We called the authorities in the middle of the night, and they searched the house with us waiting on the front lawn. Finally, they told us that they couldn't find a gas leak and asked us to open the basement. We had never been in there, at our landowner's request. But since the fire department was asking, we opened the garage door. Right in front of us was a Honda Shadow motorcycle with a large pool of gasoline underneath it, where the gas tank had apparently leaked underneath it and the rest of the house. The firefighters saw this and decided to leave, while we were left to look around the rest of the basement. Most of what we found was shelves and shelves of canned vegetables, but in the very middle of the floor, under everyone's bedrooms, was a mortuary table and a second device. I'm still not sure what that second device was. It was cylindrical with a small viewport in the front door. It seemed to have some places on the back for hoses or pipes to connect to it, although nothing was attached when we found it. It was about the right size for a couple of 2 liters of soda to fit inside. Soon after, we found out that our landowner worked night shifts at a local hospital. Whatever it might have been, we decided that enough was enough, and we all decided to move out as soon as our leases were up. I was the last one there, and I promise that the last 7 days I spent there alone are the longest days I've spent anywhere since. A little background before I start. I live in East Tennessee in the Appalachian Mountain area. I'd compare it to a rainforest sometimes with all the vegetation and dramatic mountain terrain. If you've been, you know what I'm talking about. I live at the base of a mountain at the end of a gravel road at the end of a line of cabins. It can get spooky at times. So this happened late summer of 2021, mid-August I would guess. We had a family from Honduras living in the next house down from us. The father spoke a little English and the daughter spoke some, but the wife and her sister, not their real names, but we'll call the mother Maria and the sister Anna, don't speak any English. I had gone over there a few times through the summer to get to know them, but I don't speak Spanish, so I gave up. I was friendly enough, though, I suppose. Anyway, one Saturday night, we see the mother's sister, Anna, had passed out, so my brother and I went over to try to help. She's completely unconscious, and white foam is coming out of her mouth. We think maybe it's a heart attack, so we do CPR. Fast forward. EMS gets there, and they put her into the ambulance. They run an EKG and push 4 to 8 milliliters of Narcan to reverse a possible drug overdose. But not a single thing is wrong with this woman. As the dad, we'll call him Hugo, is getting the family ready to go to the hospital, he stops me and tells me in broken English and Google Translate that a little white girl came and scared my daughters when they were playing outside. Then it came and took her, meaning Anna. At this point, my brother and I are freaking out a little. So they take her to the hospital and, same story, not a single thing is wrong with her. They released her the next morning. That Sunday afternoon, a Spanish-speaking friend goes with me to talk to her about what happened that night. She tells us that last night she had come home from work and the girls were terrified because they had heard footsteps running around inside, banging on the walls, window, and in the shower. So she said, "Don't be scared, it's nothing." So she did her nightly routine and went out to sit on the porch for a while. About an hour after that, she sees a little girl dressed in complete white walking in the yard. It scared her nieces, so they ran inside. Then the girl started walking towards her, shifting from an evil cat back to the girl. So she gets up between the posts of the house and says, "You're not allowed in," and claims the blood in the name of Jesus. The cat stands up, laughed, and grabs her throat, saying, "I will destroy your family." That's when she passed out. Later that night, Maria and the girl come over saying she's sick again, meaning Anna. So we go to see what's up. We go through the front door, and it's straight up exorcist type crap. Anna's halfway on the bed and halfway on the floor. Hugo's holding her arms down because she's clawing at her eyes and hair. So at this point, I'm thinking she's either having a seizure, is schizophrenic, or is on some kind of drug. But I think I'll wait it out for a little bit. After about 10 minutes, it seems clear that this woman is possessed. She's writhing on the floor, clawing her eyes and hair, and biting her tongue and lips so aggressively, we put a stick between her teeth to stop, which she bites in half. It's nothing like I've ever seen in a seizure, mental illness case, or any medical emergency. Hugo takes out his little St. Joseph statue and starts waving it over her head, and she kind of chuckled at him, like, that's a joke. Now, she has her eyes closed for most of this ordeal. We call our Spanish-speaking friend, and he starts praying and reading the Spanish Bible over the phone. Well, she hates that, and every time he says the name of Jesus, her eyes pop open, and she tries to claw the phone from our hands. Now, mind you, this woman is like 200 pounds, not muscle, and barely over 4 feet tall. She's about as strong as an ox in this state, and it takes 3 of us to hold her down. Maria gets some holy water they have, and I put a few drops on her forehead. It was like putting acid on her. She freaked out so bad. She's shaking and clawing to get it off. So I put a little more on and get the same reaction. Now, the holy water is nothing more than a bottle of Deer Park water with a ribbon tied around it. About an hour goes by and she starts calming down, and then she gets up like she's back to normal. She's talking and hugging Maria, and we're thinking all is good. Then she makes a mad dash for the front yard, mumbling something in Spanish. Hugo freaks out and tackles her in the gravel like a defensive lineman. She's looking past us into the darkness at someone or someones that we can't see. Then she asks for meat. Like she wants to eat meat. A strange request, so no. She asks for water, which we do give her, and she takes the bottle of, quote, holy water and chugs it, completely unfazed. Then tries to eat the bottle. Hugo and Maria take a cigarette and blow smoke in her face, which I guess is an exorcism tactic, and she gags and coughs way more than normal. Then she says, "Lucifer is here," and Hugo and I just look at each other, just about terrified. She looks all around us at things in the yard that we can't see. I call it tracking with her eyes. Like she hadn't been looking at us, but something right behind us or beside us. We take her back up on the porch and sit her down. She looks over at his truck parked in the yard and says, "Lucifer is over there." And all the truck lights come on. We're all low-key freaked out at this point. Our friend is still on the phone, listening to what's going on, and he suggests to Hugo to burn all his Catholic religious items. So Hugo takes his statue of St. Joseph, the rosary beads, votive candles, pictures of all the saints, etc., and burns them all in the front yard. Now, this Anna doesn't like at all. She gets mad, but can't do anything because we're holding our hands away from her. The fire burns for about an hour, and every time one of us goes near it, no matter what way she's facing or even when her eyes are closed, it seems like she can sense us near the fire and she'll watch us with creepy eyes. So we try to put her in a more comfortable chair and hold her up because it seems like she's gaining consciousness, opening her eyes more and looking around, tracking things out in the darkness. Well, when she looks at these things, she'll act out more, so in order to keep her from looking at them, we put the Spanish Bible directly in front of her eyes, which she doesn't like at all. It's like the Bible had an LED light in it that'll burn her eyes if she looks. So whenever she opens her eyes to find whatever's behind us, we block her view with it, and she instantly closes her eyes again. After a bit, she starts talking semi-coherently to Marie and Hugo about what's going on. She tells them she wants to be with the spirits behind the house running through the woods. Then, as she's talking, all of a sudden she stops and jerks her head to the right of the house, watching what she described as a very tall woman dressed in white. Then, as she's talking, all of a sudden she stops and jerks her head to the right of the house, watching what she described as a very tall woman dressed in white with white hair and face walk all the way around the house. Then it goes right past us into the kitchen, bangs around inside looking for food, finds water and drinks it, then gets mad because we didn't feed it. As it's walking out of the house, it tells her to read Psalm 91. Then goes and stands in the yard about 40 yards from the house by a big, dead tree. She says it then climbs the tree and sits on top waiting for us to feed it, and tells her, "I want food. Do not try to leave. I will follow you and kill you." So we go inside and put Anna to bed, because she seems to be getting tired, but she won't stop looking through the curtains to the porch telling us the woman wants to eat. So Hugo makes a plate of food and leaves it on the porch. We don't see anything, but my brother said when we have our back turned, a massive raccoon came up and ate the food, then ran under the porch. But where it ran is a dead-end corner with nowhere to go. It just disappeared. Anna is looking out, watching something very intently. She tells us the Blanca muchacha is eating the food incredibly violently, like an animal, and making a big mess, then goes on to eat the trash left over from the food. She slowly comes back and starts talking to us, which I don't understand without Google Translate, and a lot more went on that I didn't catch, being lost in translation. They, Hugo and Anna, tell me there's always weird stuff happening at the house like what I described before. I leave them with the Spanish Bible and head to my house. It's like 4 a.m. at this point, and my brothers had already gone to bed 30 minutes prior when she started to come back. So I go to work the next morning. All normal, you know? I figured the demons got sick of us and left that night. Not so. That Monday night around 10, I'm headed to bed and see a truck pull up. So I go to say hi, and it's a group of 4 Hispanic Christians that come for Anna's demon problem. The pastor of the church, his wife, and 2 other women. Only one speaks English. We'll call her Isabel. Hugo sets up some chairs and a table with that Honduran hospitality he has, and sets out coffee and Mexican cookies, and we sit around talking about what I can only assume has been going on lately. They get out a booklet with a sheet that says, Oración de Confesión General de Pecados, and start praying, repeating what the sheet of paper says. They get about halfway through, and Anna is covering her eyes and mumbling something, then falls to the ground and starts seizing again. So Hugo and I hold her down again while the pastor and the women watch her behavior. At this point, it's pretty mild. She's still got the whole eye and hair claw deal going on, and the family around them are still talking back and forth about her history, I guess. So they finally decide it's a few different demons, and they get to work expelling them. The pastor kneels over her and commands the demons to leave in the name of Jesus. They refuse, so he commands them to tell their names. They're struggling verbally back and forth for a while, but eventually they give him their names. Then he'll bind them in the name of Jesus and cast them out. Every time he casts one out, it'll start with him saying, Afuera, afuera, en el nombre de Jesús. Then in a few minutes, one of the demons starts yelling and screaming and twisting her. She throws up what looks like a pitch-black hairball, which we wipe up and burn. Then the spirit the pastor bounds by name leaves and she gets weaker. They explained every time a demon leaves the person, they expel something physical, like vomit, a burp, excrement, etc. That night, they cast 4 demons out. It went on for hours, and we ended up leaving by about 4 a.m. Hugo and Marie thank us profusely, and Anna goes to bed as she's completely worn out. The next day, I don't go to work because it's raining. It's about 3 or 4 p.m., and Maria's little girl comes running over saying something about Anna being sick again. My brother and I go over, and Anna's on her bed acting like she has stomach pain. I figured she's sick and try to ask what's going on. She tells me the Bible I left that's sitting on her desk across from her bed keeps closing by itself. She says something about the mirror behind it, and someone is watching her through it, or something like that. Then she starts falling off her bed and lying on the floor. I'm stumped as to what to do. She gets up and walks back and forth between the bathroom and her room with me following. After a minute of this, I just sit down and talk to my brother, and she just waltzes out on the back porch. I figure I'd better see what's going on, because she's been gone a minute. I round the corner, and she's hanging by her arms from the beam going over the railing, trying to jump off. I can't let that happen because there's rocks underneath, and if the fall didn't kill her, there's countless other ways to get hurt back there. Plus, it's been pouring rain all day, so I don't want to get soaked trying to keep her safe. I pull her back on the porch, and she instantly tries crawling through the lattice, so I send my brother back to our house to get help, and I have the little girl call her dad. Anna and her 2 nieces are the only ones home. While my brother was gone, I finally got Anna in a hold so she couldn't get to her face, but she gets to the decorative chain on her shirt and tries to cut her wrist with the pendant on it. I wrestle it from her hand and she tries to eat the chain. I get her to the center of the porch and away from everything she can use to hurt herself. My brother gets back and somehow she gets her hand on a rope and tries to hang herself multiple times, despite our attempts to take it from her. We'll take it from her, and as we've got it inches from her hand, she senses it, I guess, because she's got her eyes closed the whole time. And she grabs it and as quick as lightning wraps it around her neck and tightens it. Hugo and Marie eventually get there and help us hold her down. He says the pastor and his people should be there in an hour. While we're waiting, Anna kinda calms down for a few minutes. Then out of nowhere, she sees something behind us. She's telling us what it is, and Hugo and Marie are freaking out. Then she starts crying, saying it's strangling her, and starts choking up blood and has a very hard time breathing. She's clawing at her throat at an invisible hand staring right behind me, pleading whatever it is to stop. Hugo and Marie are in tears and panic. I'm just sitting there helpless because I know there's nothing I can do to help. She goes limp for a minute, and we all think she's dead. But I check her pulse and she's breathing slowly. We have about 5 minutes of calm, and she goes back to self-harm mode, trying to get something to hurt herself with. Her brother-in-law gets the bright idea to use sheets and towels knotted together as a restraining device. We wrestle her into a plastic chair and tie her to it with the sheets, taking care not to tie too tightly so we don't cut off circulation. Then we put pillows behind her head and did everything we could think of to make it as comfortable and safe as possible. After a few minutes, the pastor and his people are starting to arrive, and since she's securely restrained, the family and the pastor's people get to talking. Now, like I've said, at the time I spoke very limited Spanish, so I understood only what few words I knew, or the only woman that spoke English would translate for me. It was another 4 or 5 hours that went by with them doing more exorcism and casting demons out, praying, and at one point a Dominican lady started singing for about 20 minutes, which led most everyone else to start in. It got intense when they really started verbally hammering the demons with scripture, and even with the towels and sheets restraining her, she came so close to breaking the chair and knots that held her. Eventually, they prevailed, and she was made clean of everything. Hugo and I burned all the sheets that restrained her and the material they used to clean up after she vomited up the demons. We all sat on the front porch, and the family explained what all had happened in her personal life to lead up to this. It was about a 2-hour conversation, and I understood little of it, but I guess they all understood, so I was fine with just knowing that I helped. One thing I did catch was, a woman and her child had died in this house years ago and were angry with the spirits Anna had in her, or something like that. Now Anna had went to her room, because understandably, she was very tired. After the people started leaving, she came out and asked me to tell her what happened while she was possessed. Obviously, this was difficult for me as I had to use Google Translate to tell her the long story. But I think she kind of understood it, and she told me what she had experienced. Basically, she said that she had been taken back to Honduras, and she had seen her ex, or Maria's ex. She called him by name, but I don't remember it now. And she said he had a group of men practicing voodoo on a doll that looked like her. She showed me a YouTube video of a man walking around an old Catholic graveyard at night, and as he would go through certain places, he would pause the video and say, "I saw this," or, in a house-like tomb that had a stone altar in the back, "The men were in there with the doll, torturing me." There was a lot more, I think she said. But, like I said, it was all in Spanish. She tells me the woman in white that haunts the place likes to sit in the big dead tree in front of the house with that little girl in white. It's pretty much back to normal now, so I go to bed. After the next couple of days, more odd things happen. First thing was, that Friday evening when I got back from work, they had moved out of the house. They left most of their things, only taking the bare necessities, and I've only seen them 3 times since then. Second thing was, that Sunday morning we woke up and the dead tree the spirits likes to climb on was fallen in a straight line directly towards the front door of their house. Third thing wasn't so odd, and it happened maybe a month or so later. So the house had been vacant for a while, and the landlord sent some guys over to clean it up. Now, I kind of know these guys, so I go over and talk to them about the house. They speak more Spanish than English, but I can understand what they tell me. Basically, they had both lived in this house before, and they told me they had both experienced supernatural events. Like hearing footsteps inside and outside the house at night, violent pounding on the walls and doors, seeing faces in the corners of the windows. And the one man had seen the woman in white, and an identical one that was dressed all in black. Long black hair, no face, and big red eyes. The white one never really came inside, but the first time he had seen the black one, it was hanging off the ceiling like a bat, and the second, it was sitting on the counter looking at him. He told me years ago people had died in this house under very suspicious circumstances. I've written this all out over the past month as I'm very busy with work and whatnot. It's been almost a year since it happened, and there's so much that happened in those few nights that it all kind of ran together, and I'm sure me not understanding all of what was said, and being so long ago, I've forgotten a few minor details. But to the best of my knowledge, I've recorded most of what happened. Now you can believe my account of these events or not. It's really up to you. I'll tell you this, though. After that experience, I've come to take this matter very seriously. And it's more real to me now than ever before. This just happened to me, and I want to share my story. A friend was in town, and I wanted to grab dinner on a Wednesday. I live in a relatively safe suburb adjacent to a major city in the U.S., and I've always felt generally safe here, even as a small young woman. We met at 7 p.m. and parted ways around 11 p.m. My 2 friends walked home, and I hopped on the subway. I called my dad and asked him to pick me up at the subway so I wouldn't have to walk home in the dark. I waited in a brightly lit bus stop alcove area, which is near the subway stop. I don't mind sharing what I was wearing: a tank top, long skirt, small bag, and sandals. I don't go out often these days, but did uncomfortably feel some eyes on me. The bus stop has a roundabout for buses to enter. A car stopped on the other side of the roundabout, and a man with red eyes got out. He seemed high. On what, I'm not sure. I wasn't paying much attention to him because I find that eye contact seems like an invitation for men to talk to women. It didn't matter. He approached me with a small dog in his arms. "Do you want a dog?" he asked. I was like, what the fuck? No. He held her out to me like he was inviting me to pet her. I'm not a huge dog person, so I said, "Oh, no, I don't like dogs." Then he said, "I just found her. Will you take her?" And set her down near me. I was like, what the fuck? I asked, "You found her?" He said, "Yeah, I don't know what to do with her, so will you take her?" While I'm not a dog person, I am a cat person, and know far too well that you should try to call the number on the tag if you find a lost animal. I saw that she had a collar and tag and asked if he had called the number. He seemed confused, so I began trying to see the phone number on the tag, but she growled at me and I backed off. At this point, my dad rolled up and asked me what I was doing. So I gave him a short summary. I asked the man if he could hold the dog because she seemed more comfortable with him, so that I could see and call the number on the tag. I called twice and they didn't pick up. My dad called over and said to call the police or animal control. I couldn't locate the number for animal control on Google, so I called the police, hoping that they could transfer me. I began speaking with the dispatcher when the man began leaving for his car while the dog followed him. He called over and said, "Hey, the dog got in my car." And I saw that it had, confusingly enough. He took off while I was confusingly telling the dispatcher what had happened and that I didn't need a police or ambulance nor animal control either anymore. I got in the car with my dad and he told me that I should have called the police in the first place, or told the guy to call the police. Hindsight is 20/20, or somewhat close to that. I feel so vulnerable. I don't go out anymore in large part because I'm afraid of how people will treat me, and because I've had so many bad experiences in the past with men on the street. I have changed what I wear so as not to attract attention from men. I listen to true crime podcasts because I want to be prepared for when something bad might happen to me, but I couldn't spot how shady this situation was until it ended. Well, maybe that's not true. I definitely knew something was off with this guy, but I thought he was too high to deal with a lost dog. I was definitely blindsided by the prospect of this stranger dumping a lost dog on me, a dog that clearly had a collar on it. I thought it would be an easy fix to call the owner and have them find their dog. What if this guy had approached me on the street while I was walking home? What if my dad hadn't been on his way to pick me up? Would he have approached me if I had been wearing jeans and a t-shirt? There was another man at the station, though further away, and I think he was unlocking his bike. Why didn't he see what was going on? What was the original guy's intentions with this trick? I have no idea what he wanted, but it didn't seem good. I blocked the number that I ended up calling. I don't know what to do or what to make of this. I'll probably run away from strangers and wear boxy gender-neutral clothing from now on, which is what I basically had been doing already. I'm a little sad because I had recently started coming out of my shell to say hello to strangers and give them a little nod as a way of saying hello. This is the norm in my town. But I've gotten into the habit of looking the other way because I'm so afraid of how people will fetishize me or say something horrible to me. I'm still haunted by old memories of an ex-boyfriend I dated for only a few months. We met online and lived an hour apart, but we clicked very fast and started seeing each other regularly. Things were going great for about a month, And then one day we stopped at my place so I could pack some clothes to go stay at his place for the weekend. We walked into my bedroom, and as I started packing my belongings, I noticed him scanning around my room with his eyes. After a few awkward moments of silence, he began to ask me some very specific and very detailed questions. Do you ever move your pillow to the foot of your bed at night and pull your blinds all the way up so you can see the stars out of this window before you go to sleep? I bet you use this lamp over here the most. It's the one that I'd use. I was frozen in shock. I just stood there, speechless, looking at him in disbelief. He just described everything I did the night before, and it was the only time I ever rolled up my blinds at night and laid at the opposite end of my bed to look out at the stars in the sky. I told nobody about that, so how the hell did he know? The only thing I could do next was laugh it off and ask him how he knew, but he just kind of shrugged it off and changed the subject. I couldn't stop thinking about it the whole weekend, though, wondering if he had been watching me. I hid my paranoia as best I could until I got home. But then I did a deep sweep of my entire bedroom, looking for any sign of hidden cameras. I found nothing. I didn't have any laptops, computers, TVs, or security cameras in my bedroom that he could have hacked to spy on me. I did have my mobile phone in the room, but it was lying flat on the nightstand that night. If he was physically stalking me, it would have been difficult for him to see into my bedroom, as my room was up high. He would have had to watch further away from the forest, and even if that was the case, there were still some large trees in my backyard that would have blocked his view. It just didn't make sense. It still doesn't make sense. I've tried to pass it off as coincidence, but when I step back and look at the whole picture, there was just something not right about him. I vividly recall the first time I ever spoke to him on the phone before we met. We had so much in common. Almost too much in common. From books we were reading to the very specific interests, hobbies, and habits, I thought I met my soulmate. Nobody has ever made me feel so alive. He swept me off my feet, only to drop me from what I thought was heaven. He became a different person, seemingly overnight. He was a narcissist, and I watched his mask fall off. We had texted on and off for a few years after, but I've since gone no contact. I will probably never know the hows and whys, but I continue to wonder and look over my shoulder. Thank you for listening to this episode of Too Scared. All stories have been shared with the permission of their respective authors. On today's episode, you heard Abandoned Location Was Haunted by Cheap Row 9798, My College House by TullyInTurtleTerror, My Encounter with a Possessed Woman by S-Guest 034, Man Asked Me If I Wanted a Stray Dog at 11 p.m. by HollyMyQueen, How Did He Know by Optickle Alooshun. For more scary stories, make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening. My name is Arrey Edwards, and I'll see you next time on Too Scared.